Okay, so honestly, the most important thing about this video is that you see a dragon pen. So hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. It is another one of our mother culture videos. So we are talking about how we build an atmosphere in our homes through the discipline or habit of living ideas. So we read, that's how you do mother culture. And I have a whole series about this. I talk about collections of books that I would recommend for different topics, interests, times of life, things like that. And today I'm just gonna be sharing about my own literary life, what I have finished reading in January and February. So I am someone who thinks that when you read something or learn something amazing, it is not for keeps, it is to bless others. And so actually I am missing a couple of the books we're gonna talk about. I'll just be putting pictures up for you. In fact, this is just a dust jacket. And so it's because I lend my books out to my friends. And so some of the books that I wanted to include in this actually don't have in my house right now because they're with my dear friends. And so we will just pretend that we have them and go from there. I think we'll all do just fine. Now, I want to say a couple of things before we start out here. One is this book pen, this book dragon pen that I am wearing. I got this from Rembrandt Is, and it's actually one of my greatest small joys in life. I wear it all the time. I have dreams of being known as like the homeschool co-op mom lady who always has a dragon pen on because I talk about dragons a lot. If you missed the fairy tale video last week, that was just a smidge. I really like to talk about dragons. I don't know, that made me sound really nerdy, but I think it's cool, but I guess all nerds think their thing is cool. Okay, so anyways, I got this from Rembrandt Is, which is the small publishing house that does a lot of stuff for the CMEC, which is our curriculum. I was there in November, early December to buy Christmas presents for people. And I saw this by the register and it had to come home with me. And I'm just gonna tell you about the etymology of the word bookworm because we're talking about books today. Totally fits. And so if you think about bookworm or bookworm, like the old English, W-Y-R-M, a bookard could be a library or someone who has a lot of books. And a worm is a dragon. And if you know anything about dragons, they hoard things. They hoard their treasure. And so to be someone with a library of books or a lot of books is to be a book dragon or a bookworm. Isn't learning so fun? Okay, but anyways, back to what we're gonna talk about today. So I think it's important that you remember that when you see a list of the books that I read or other people read, that it is not to tempt you towards book gluttony. We are not trying to speed through books to have impressive stacks that we've read in the last 3 months or anything like that, even over the course of a year. And I say this because I'm someone who is often tempted towards book gluttony. I want to just shove it all in. I want to get all the information into my head, all of the knowledge I can possibly get, or I feel really pressured to read what everyone else is reading or everyone's most classical list ever and different things like that. And we don't want to do that. When we read, we're not trying to get something from a book. We're not trying to master the book. The book is doing things to us. And so a book will tell you how it needs to be read. And slowly and thoughtfully is usually the name of the game. So please note that I said these are the books I finished in January and February, not that I started them in January and February. I have some books that I will read over the course of 8 months and some books that I'll read over the course of a week. And it really just depends on the subject matter involved and also where I'm at in my life. And so hopefully that's an encouragement to you. If you like to watch a lot of book YouTube videos or you like to keep up with book lists and you think, wow, everyone is reading so much all of the time. How in the world am I supposed to do this? I have small kids too. How do they do it? Don't think about that. Instead, hear what each book is about. Consider where you are in life, what you need to grow in, what interests you have, where you might be a little bit deficient in either your mind or your soul, and pursue the literary life that way. I'm really passionate about book gluttony because I've really struggled with it. And so I want to be helpful in that. And when I talk about books, I don't want to cause anyone else to fall into the book glutton category. So what I'm going to do today, a little bit different than how I usually do it. I'm definitely here to share ideas from books, but I often will just do summaries of books and, that I liked them. Today, with this stack of books, I'm actually going to be telling you one fascinating idea from each book, something that, as Mason says ideas do, seized me. It may not be the main part of the book, it may not be the main thing the author was even trying to get across to me or show me, but it is something that I thought was really fascinating or interesting or beautiful or worth thinking about longer, and so that's actually what I'm gonna tell you from each book. I thought that would be fun. It's like a Mason book club video. All right, so let's get started here. Now this first one, I've already talked about before. It's Amusing Ourselves to Death. It's in my video about books moms should read right now, so I'll link that above for you. But I actually, because I had been talking about it, and then I knew I was getting rid of my smartphone, which an update is coming soon on that as well, I wanted to quickly reread it. So I did reread this the first week of January, and once again enjoyed it just as much as I have in my other readings of it. But the one idea that I want to give you, because I'm going to try not to just summarize every book, the one idea that I want to give you about Amusing Ourselves to Death that really captures my attention is that the medium by which you share information demands a response in the viewer or the listener or the reader and changes something about our formation. So what he's saying in this book, he's talking about the onset of the media age, particularly television, and what that did to our public discourse. If you don't know about this, he was making the point that all of information sharing, whether it be religion, education, politics, became a sort of show business. And this was back when the TV was coming out. Now, of course, we have a lot of different media. We have social media particularly. And so he makes the point that the medium that you use will change something about you, how you're formed, what you're formed to, and then also how you respond to it. If you've never thought about this, it's fascinating. So particularly the social media question, because I hear a lot of Christians have conversations, I've talked about this a little bit before, of how can we redeem this for Christ? When I think the fundamental question is, what does this medium do to both us as creators and consumers, and is that a good, worthwhile thing? Because I talk to a lot of people who will say, oh, no. I hear a lot of great stuff about Jesus, right? Kind of like the gold standard. If you get to hear about Jesus on it, then it's probably okay for you if that's what you're doing. We won't even touch all the lesser things on there. But I am willing to argue that if you are truly interested in engaging with truth, goodness, and beauty, Christ himself, the Logos who holds all things in harmony, then the medium matters. And maybe social media is not a medium worth your time because it's going to change what you are formed to, how you relate to truth, and then what you do with it, how you respond. And so maybe it's worth asking yourself, what does the medium do and what mediums will I engage in? So that's the first thing. Okay, so this next one I'm really excited about. I'm so excited that it's just the book jacket. That's all I've got right here. This is Love What Lasts by Joshua Gibbs. I have talked about Gibbs many a time. He is one of my favorite classical educators. I have learned so much from him over the years by reading his column over at the Circe Institute called The Cedar Room, and then also I've purchased different conference talks and things that he's done through Circe. They were kind enough to send me this book as an advanced reader copy. So I don't think it's out yet, but I want you to write it down somewhere so that when Circe finally puts it on their website, you can buy it. This is why my friend across the country has the book, because I was talking about it so much and she could not stand not being able to read it. Also a big fan of Gibbs, and so I had to just send it to her. That's why I don't have it with me. But here you'll see in this picture of when I realized that the email that I received from Mr. Gibbs was not an email blast, but actually a real email to me offering me his new book, and the consequent shock and delight on my face. So it was just such an exciting moment, and I would have purchased this book anyways, but now I'm just going to tell you the most fascinating thing for me in this. Of course, the book is talking about how you save your soul from mediocrity. That's kind of his tagline. And he looks at three categories of things: the uncommon, the common, and the mediocre, and what happens to our souls when we engage with each. Interesting enough on its own, but something that I have never heard before, and I have a history degree, so I've put in some time and energy into learning about the past, is the idea that the Enlightenment, which I do dump on in almost everything that I make, that the Enlightenment came about as a direct consequence of the Protestant Reformation. Now, regardless of where you fall on the theological spectrum, this is a very fascinating idea. So with the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, basically people said goodbye to church authority. There was no longer one voice telling you things about reality. Whether they were right or wrong, that's not what I'm here to talk about. But the fact that we rid ourselves of church hierarchy and authority, and in a sense became these smaller groups right from the start, right? Because if you know much about the Reformers, they argued about everything. There was very little that they all agreed upon. And that's why you now have so many denominations. Even back then, you had so many branches fighting with each other, right? Like the Lutherans were never going to hang out with the Anabaptists. They disagreed about everything. And that's actually his point, is that because we were then disagreeing theologically about everything to the point where we were killing one another, the social spheres, like the marketplace, the daily life, ordinary, going to the butcher, going to the baker, going to the cobbler, could no longer have anything to do with religion because people couldn't work with one another. The Lutheran couldn't work with the Anabaptist. They vehemently disagreed on matters that were so important to a Christian back then that they had to remove God from the main places of society and focus only on what they could all agree on. They may not be able to agree on what happens during the Eucharist or communion, the Lord's Supper, but they could agree on the process of fermentation in wine. And so with that removal of God from all of things in life, we started off this huge kick, this movement for rationalism. What can we prove that we can agree on and that we can trust? And everything else you have becomes a personal thing. You have personal beliefs, and you take them back into your home, and you don't talk about them anywhere else. And what does that do in history as it continues to move through to education, which is of course how I'm thinking about it? That's why we have a belief that we can have secular education. That's actually not a thing. You can't do that. There is no neutral education, right? And so that is the time in history, as the Enlightenment started going and everything, that we pushed God out of his world and created an inner world where we could prove everything, which then became much of our rationalism that we are still eating today. Is that not interesting? I've never heard anyone say that before, and I just thought it was a fascinating idea. So not the main point of the book, but a very important point of the book. Okay, so the next book is a very short one. It's called Domestic Monastery. I'll put a picture up because this is a book that I lent to a friend to read. It talks about your home like it's a little monastery. What are the practices of the monastic life that we might bring in? Now, I'm someone who does make a rule of life. If you are new to that concept, let me recommend Tish Oxenreider's Rule of Life workshops, self-paced workshop she has on her website. I did it a couple of years ago and loved it. And when I did that workshop, I just became all obsessed with finding out about monastic rules of life. What did the monks practice? What could be used in our modern lives? What could we form as habits in our ordinary daily sorts of things? So I really got into the monks, I guess you could say that. And one of the things that I had forgotten about but was reminded of in this book is the use of bells in monasteries. And so for moms who are often interrupted by small children and the needs of just ordinary life in our homes, which are totally fine and good. In fact, C.S. Lewis would say, these are not interruptions to your real life. These things are your real life, which is also a very helpful thing. But I think the way monks use the bells can be really helpful for a mom. So no matter what you are doing, when a bell rings at a monastery, or maybe not all monasteries, but these particular ones, you stop immediately what you were doing and move on to the next thing. And it could be you were writing a letter and you stop mid-letter. You could be putting soup in your mouth and you put the spoon down, whatever it is. And then you move on to the next thing. And the point is that our time is not ours, it's God's. So he has things for us to do and we need to respond to him. We need to be quick and cheerful in obedience to that. And I think for moms, we can often have like a list of things we want to be getting done, and they can be real things, right? Like I don't just make up fun things I need to get done during the day. I have a lot of things to do for my family. But when my kid needs me or I'm sleeping in the middle of the night and they need me, when you hear the bell, when you hear the child, you get up from the thing you were doing and you go and serve them. It's just a good little reminder when you feel like you're constantly being interrupted. And so Domestic Monastery has a lot of really beautiful ideas like that. I wish I had the book, but it's a pretty short read. You could read it, within a single mother culture block if you do about half an hour. Okay, so this is Rembrandt Is in the Wind. I want to mention that I have this particular copy from the Rabbit Room. I know you can get it on Amazon, but I think the Rabbit Room is the only place where you can get this one, but it has much larger full color photos as well as its hardback, which I'm always a fan of. And so the book itself is absolutely beautiful and I highly recommend it just as you want to study the art and look at it a little bit more. So one fun thing was after reading this, there were a couple pieces that are actually at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So if you're near Philadelphia, you can see one of Van Gogh's sunflowers. And you can also see Tanner's Annunciation, which was beautiful. So I got to see both of them a couple of weeks ago and I learned about them by reading this book. So anyways, this book is for those who would love to know what they are looking at when they go to museums, but maybe don't know how to read a painting yet. And he takes you through a bunch of different artists. He gives you backgrounds on their life. It's like part biography, part art history, part philosophy, part theology. It's a really beautiful, well-written book. So something that he does in this book is he goes through the artist's life, and many of them have a lot of dark things, either in their past or what they were working through while they were still creating these beautiful works, particularly the religious paintings, where you're like, wow, you had such a touch on the beauty of this scripture passage, or you clearly communicated the gospel and yet you were stabbing people and getting drunk every weekend. And what I actually really appreciated about the way he formed this book and the way he talks about these artists and their great masterpieces is that goodness is something you can train your eye to see, even in the brokenness of life. And that is something that I think is very necessary as a mom. I often talk about it like having a tiny mercy list. You need to train your sight to be able to see God's hand in your life, even when it seems very bleak, or even when you're struggling with the sins of others or your own sin. And in doing that, being captivated by goodness, there is a healing that comes to the soul. And so while it wasn't none of my captivating ideas in this video are the main point of the book. They're just things that have really stuck out to me. I did really enjoy thinking about art as something you can read, searching for that. Okay, another book that I have already lent out was also sent to me as a gift from the Basilian Publishing House, and it's called Patterns for Life. And so it is a book all about Charlotte Mason philosophy from an Orthodox Christian perspective. And the way they present Mason was incredibly life-giving and edifying. I think there are a lot of ways that looking at Mason moms on the internet, you can feel this burden to kind of copy and apply. You think that it's possible just like, buy their homeschool with all their affiliate links and then get their homeschool. But if you've been around here, I really think it's important that you equip moms with the philosophy behind the educational pedagogy or ideas so that they can then apply it in their lives in ways that serve their particular families, right? There are high ideals, big banners that we can all agree upon, but the way it works out into our ordinary lives is going to shift because my kids are not your kids. My sense of humor is not your sense of humor. But if you have the philosophy, you have the guiding compass, if you will, through the waters of everything thrown at you as you continue to pursue truth, goodness, and beauty within the walls of your home as you home educate. And I think this book did a fantastic job of that. They have a rich, deep, in their bones kind of understanding of Mason's philosophy. And the way they talk about it in the book is this beautiful invitation into submitting to God's design for things, understanding that he has a way in which we flourish as people, a way in which we heal, a way in which we change, and a way in which we experience true living. And that's how they lay out Mason's philosophy. And then they bring in this Orthodox Christian perspective where they say, yeah, Mason really nailed this, which for everyone who thinks Mason was this wild progressive making up her own ideas, she obviously was not. And they bring the richness of church history and the early church into that and what some of the church fathers would have said. But then also they give some like, hey, maybe put a red flag here. Mason is very Victorian. She's also a person in her time and place, as we all are. And so she has blind spots. And here's how the Orthodox vision of faith and life actually comes in and expands this or corrects this or offers a fuller picture of this. And so I loved the book. Even if you're non-Orthodox Christian, I highly recommend this. Again, they have an amazing handle on Mason, and that slow turning back towards God and the ordinary commonplace things of life and just bending into what he says is good instead of trying to grab and clamor for freedom is going to be the picture of the good life we actually want to give our kids. And the book, again, was phenomenal. And that idea I could probably think about until I die. So there's my idea from that one. Okay, talking about souls, Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. So I read through this actually with a book club at church and really enjoyed being able to discuss it with other people. Lewis takes the myth, I think it's Opulus, Apulus, it's from the Golden Ass, but it's the story of Cupid and Psyche. And so he does kind of a story retelling, which is very much a medieval practice where you take the form of another story and then you change something about it. And so he does that, he changes things. And of course the things he's changing mean something, you need to pay attention. Anyways, there is a lot I would want to talk about from this book with you, particularly about the modern rational man and Lewis's constant caution against that versus mysticism and holy mysteries and different things like that. But for this one idea I can give you, I want to talk about psyche, which means soul, how the soul must learn to harmonize the rational material world around us and then the mysterious spiritual reality that we actually live in. And that happens in this book. Psyche means soul. She is, this kind of eventually semi-goddess. And she is the only one in what Lewis changes who can rightly see the castle that she now lives within. And there is something to that as our soul harmonizes, which is an idea from the medieval world, which is of course where we get the classical tradition, the 7 liberal arts, all organized as they are, that all knowledge is harmoniously held together through Christ who is our Logos. And in doing that, we change. We can rightly see. And isn't so much of literature about seeing and unseen or seeing and not seeing? And so this is such a good book. I know a lot of Christians struggle with it because it's like, why are we talking about mythology? We don't believe in the gods, but you're totally missing it. You're totally missing it, and you need to reread it because you need to dig deep in your own soul and think about what needs to harmonize. And that, actually, I'll have a book coming up in a future video about the full medieval worldview. Oh, actually, no, I have one right now. Actually, I have The Medieval Mind of C.S. Lewis sitting right next to me by Baxter. This is great. It was a Christmas gift from one of my good friends. And it's the most autumn book ever because it's all about Jack. I love Jack. And so there's a lot to say here. He goes through how did Lewis form his mind? What was his mind? Because we all know Lewis, the creator of the Chronicles of Narnia and the Screwtape Letters, and we know him for his wartime addresses on the abolition of man and different things like that, or mere Christianity. But there was a third mind, and it was his academic mind, in which he was very much a medieval man. He called himself the last dinosaur. No one was left that thought like him. He was a dying breed. I really want to be a dinosaur too. And there's so much in here that you should read. Speaking of the medieval world and the symphonic harmony of the cosmos, but the idea I'm going to pull out here to hopefully whet your appetite for the book is that Lewis hated automobiles and newspapers. I did not know this before. I had not read anything where he explicitly attacked those things, but he saw them as sacraments of modernity. Oh, that's so good. And he believed there was a cosmic imaginary shift. So the cosmic imaginary is how you view the world, like the images, the symbols, the imaginative things that say something to us, that tell us the story of our time and place, because we are narrative creatures. And that was shifting, Lewis saw, from this cosmic symphony, this idea of music and harmony, to a machine. As we only thought about quantifiable metrics as the scientific revolution began, and isn't that so fun? When we only thought about that, we actually created a new ignorance in man. And we left, as Baxter says, we left man in a spiritual and moral desert, because nothing meant anything more than what could be measured. And that really changes how you view the world. There is a loss of seeing things as icons, as pointing to the greater reality beyond the material world, but also, and I talk about this a lot in season 2, it changed man from being an encounterer to being a manipulator in God's world. And when we manipulate, we misuse. And when we do that, we actually destroy what makes us persons. And so that loops back into the abolition of man. And that is the idea I'm going to give you from this. And I'm not going to say anything else because it's so good. You need to buy it. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, and the last one today is The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. I did not expect to love this as much as I did. I've heard about Boethius. In fact, Lewis is considered like a modern Boethius. He loved Boethius, and so I knew that. And when your best friend, C.S. Lewis, loves something, you're like, I should love it too. This is great. I will try and probably read this once a year. I have a lot of books I want to read every year. That tends to be the problem. However, this one would be worth it. And so Boethius was a real person. He actually wrote this when he was awaiting trial and eventually his execution for treason. And he went from being like a very well-respected, very rich, and a pretty happy family from historical accounts, a really like good life, everyone would agree, to this terrible, terrible end. And he's arguing with philosophy in prison. Like, that's what this is. And he's arguing about fortune, about God and different things, and philosophy is bringing him the sweet balm that she has brought him before. And so one of the things that I want to give you from the ideas that I thought was particularly interesting, and I ended up contemplating quite a bit of this particular section, is the idea of man's covetousness and the way that we actually look at the things beneath us, because we are made in God's image, we are above the rest of creation. And so we look at these other things and try to take what is theirs to adorn ourselves and make us feel important, whether that be riches or jewels or power or position or beauty, whatever it is. And we try to make that ours. And philosophy is scolding and, rightly showing that it's a debasement of who we are. Like, these natural things, like a flower is content in that it's a flower and it does what a flower should do. And yet we who bear the divine image and who have even the rational, she talks about the rational mind, I would even say like a beauty sense, all the different parts of us, we forgo those things in pursuit of lesser gold that isn't ours. And it's very applicable to the modern age. These are the books that you think, who needs to read that? That has no bearing in my life, but it actually does. So Consolation of Philosophy, Boethius. Don't be intimidated by the name or that it's very old. I think everyone would really enjoy this. And I have the mint edition, if that helps. I thought the translation was really nice. So enjoy that as well. Okay, so that's the list for January and February, what I've been reading over here. I hope that you are reading some great books as well. If you want to tell me about them, please do below. I'm gonna be sharing something special next week that is actually one of my Patreon monthly Q&A resources, but I'm gonna share it over here. And after that, we'll be back with a phone update, because I actually really think it's time that we talk about Gnosticism, smartphones, and the acts of gentle defiance. So I'll see you guys then.